episode 14, but first episode on this new account. So let's get it started. Oh, hi, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited for this. So I have to say, this is the first time doing a live on this account. So I have no idea who's going to pop in and who's not, but I know that there's always the replay. So I am so excited to get started with this.
Yeah, congratulations on starting a new account as well, because that's no small thing, is it? It's, quite massive. So well done to you for being very brave.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's totally a huge undertaking, but I have so much content that I was like, let me just slowly get it back on. So yes, but today is all about you. So everyone that's tuning in, thank you so much. And those that are coming in and seeing this later. So this is a show that I have every week, and basically it spotlights adults, or I've had two high schoolers actually, with dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, or all three, or any form of that. And I just feel like there's not a lot of space for folks to really share their stories. And I just love hearing people's stories, because overall there's always a similar theme in everyone's story, no matter where they live, no matter what their ethnicity is. And I just find it fascinating. It's almost like research, hearing this. So yeah. Tracy, I want to give you the floor to kind of share what you're comfortable with, what your dyslexia story is, what you do for a living, how that has helped, your dyslexia has helped you be creative in so many different aspects. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so before I go into that, I want to let you know there's somebody that you have to speak to. I interviewed him yesterday. He is a 9-year-old dyslexic,
yes,
Amazon best-selling author called Harry Devon. So make sure that I must get you two connected, because I'm sure you'd have a fabulous conversation. So a bit about me. I am an American. I'm from Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I moved to the UK in 1980. And so being a kid in the 80s, dyslexia was very much frowned upon. It was quite shameful. It was often undiagnosed. And at the age of 11, my mother, who knew she was dyslexic, school was such a struggle, and homework every evening was such a struggle,
right, that
she decided that it was best to get me tested, so that at least I had some sort of something to back me up,
right,
that helped me a little bit. But even back then, they didn't really give you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, but all the same, my mother thought it was really important for me to get the diagnosis. So we went up to Harley Street in London, which is, for those of you who don't know, is quite a prestigious place. It's where all the top doctors are.
Okay.
And, so it was a very expensive thing to have done. It certainly was not normal for people to be tested for dyslexia at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the test, and it was weird, because there was things that I was looking at and I was going, but that's so simple. All I have to do is connect the dots.
Right.
Why can't I connect the dots? Why isn't this working? So that was the first time I had a real epiphany about it, because I just thought up until that point that I was a bit stupid, and that I was very slow to catch on to things. I've always felt like I was the only kid in class to not know what is being talked about, to not have an understanding of what is going on. And frequently I left lessons being like, I don't even know what that was about.
Right. I have a clarifying question, just so I understand the timeline. So, excuse me. So you said you were born in Philadelphia. When did you move to the UK? When did you move to England?
I just turned 6.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say, you really have an accent. I didn't know that you were I don't hear Philly at all in your speaking. So you've been there for a very long time to actually really, that is your native way of communicating with your accent. Okay.
Yeah.
And so your mom knew she was dyslexic. Was it because she was diagnosed, or she just kind of did her own self-diagnosis?
No, she just always suspected.
Okay.
and her side of the family had always been incredibly creative, and had, like, my grandfather was a sign painter by trade, and he built boats, and he built everything, and my uncle's exactly the same, and my mother's always had that creative side to her. But and that's one thing that can be a dyslexic strength. Not everybody has it, but some people do. And I think that's the confusing thing about dyslexia, is that it's not linear. What some people struggle with, others may not. In fact, others may really excel at the thing that some dyslexic people struggle with. So it's very hard. It's very hard to get a grip on, to kind of, because it's not tangible. It's not one size fits all. It's so variable.
And it's individualized. I mean, it's very, and I think that's the thing. Like, I don't know your thoughts on this. I've talked to some dyslexics who actually don't like the term invisible disability, because, they're like, I was diagnosed as an adult and I struggled in school and I wasn't invisible. What I went through was obvious. That teacher should have helped me. But then some folks are like, well, yeah, I can see it being invisible because maybe they had an early diagnosis. So I always look at some people are really angry, rightfully so, and some are like, I'm not as angry because I was diagnosed at 10, or I got interventions in 2nd grade, or whatever the case might be. So obviously I want you to finish your story, but I just wanted to make that connection, where I do find that to be interesting.
Yeah, it is a really interesting and valid point. And I get the invisible disability because it's something that when you look at me, you don't think that I have any kind of disabilities, because I look like a normal person. I look like
an able-bodied person.
Yeah. So, and I don't, honestly, I don't class myself as having a disability. Everybody, no matter who you are, you will have struggles in life. There's going to be things that you're good at and things that you're not so good at. And whether you're dyslexic or not, my son is autistic and dyslexic. He has challenges. There are different challenges to what most people have, but he also excels at other things. So I kind of feel like it all levels out.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It all balances out in the end.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Somebody posed a question in a group that I'm in recently that said, if you could wave a magic wand, would you remove your dyslexia?
I've heard that question before. What's your answer? No, right?
No. Yeah. I wouldn't get rid of it. It caused me a lot of pain. In my formative years, going through certainly primary school, in those years before I was diagnosed and around the time that I was diagnosed. Well, the 80s and 90s were a bit unforgiving with that sort of thing anyway. But I wouldn't change it because, and I know that people say this a lot, but it has made me really resilient. I don't give up on anything. I always see everything that I do through to the end. I always find some way of getting to where I need to be, whatever the challenge is. And I think that's one of the things that has really supported me in my life and in my work and the people that I work with.
Yeah. And I think so. Marcia, I interviewed her. I don't know if you follow her at all. She's the Black dyslexic. She's actually in England as well. And
maybe I do.
I think she was episode 10. So if you go on my page after this, I've uploaded all of them. It's there. But I mean, really, like, she shared her journey as well. And like I said, there's so many themes. There's so many common themes with all dyslexics. And so I wanted to ask you, when were you actually diagnosed? Because you said you went to these like ritzy doctors in the 80s.
I know, it was a bit intimidating. I think my nerves got the better of me as well. I was 11 at the time.
Okay.
But it wasn't an easy thing to organize, and there was a lot of waiting to get the appointment and so on and so forth. So it wasn't as direct as my mother had hoped that it would be.
Right.
Considering, you know, you're paying for a specialist.
Yeah.
To give the diagnosis and do the test.
Yeah, it's a kick.
So yeah, that was, you know, my mother said, oh, it's brilliant, you know, you get extra time in your exams. And I was like, yeah, but that just means that I'm going to sit there and struggle for longer. And
exactly.
It's going to be a slightly more painful experience than it would have been if it was shorter.
Right.
I think for young people, it's very hard to see where it's going to take you. You know, we're not mind readers. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how this is going to affect us. But we, as adults, know that the things that challenge us are the things that give us the biggest amount of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the things that really push us forward in life. So I just see it as that I had many of those challenges early on, and actually it gave me a bit of an advantage when I did hit my 20s, because I was, I think, much more robust.
Okay.
To life, to situations, I was much more able to cope than many of my peers at university. Right. You know, I saw a lot of them struggle with various different things for various different reasons. And to me, the answers were obvious, but they couldn't see them. So yeah, it did really help me, but with hindsight, I look back and I can say that. But when you're going through something that's very difficult and you're struggling and it's stressful and you just want to fit in, which you do
right.
as a child, you just want to like blend into the background so that nobody sees you. And it's impossible to do that when you're struggling so much.
Right.
Because either it's obvious that you've got the bottom marks, or it's obvious that the teacher is constantly singling you out.
Right.
To assist you. So that there's no escaping it. I mean, one of the things that was suggested to me for my son in school was that he would have different colored cards on his desk. And with his autism, he struggles to maintain focus. So quite often he loses track of what's going on, what's happening in the conversation. So he has different cards that he can signal the teacher to quite discreetly to indicate that he doesn't know what's going on, or he's feeling insecure, or so they're just flags that can notify the teacher discreetly, so that it's not made such a big deal about, which I thought was quite a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been in situations like that, working specifically with kids with autism, and it's like, how can we kind of make the student feel comfortable, not singled out, you know, come up with something that makes that it's really an understanding between the teacher, parent, and student, because you don't want to do something that you might think, oh, this is great, and then the student's like, no, I want to look like my peers. And I don't know how old your son is, but you know, working, gosh, this is my 6th year now in secondary school. I mean, middle school is a different beast. I mean, all they care about is what their friends think about them. So it's like, I could be failing this class, but I'm not going to have that extra time because my friends aren't taking it, you know? And it's like, those are the things that, as you said, in your adolescence and your formative years, you're in the thick of this like whirlwind storm, and you're not thinking like, this is going to help me in my future. You're just like, I want to look like them.
So my son is 12. Well, my youngest, who has autism, is 12. You forget what a whirlwind it was being that age.
Yes.
There's so many plates spinning. You're like, it's hard to manage normal life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let alone if you're struggling with things. So it has its challenges, and I certainly felt it when I was that age. And oddly enough, I went to school, I went to university. At university I studied art. I went into a creative because that was the only area that I felt confident in. And of course, when you go to university, you still have to write a thesis. You still
Right.
have, you know, academics, which I was kind of hoping there wouldn't be a lot of. So there was surprisingly more of that than I had hoped for.
Right.
But that was fine. You know, I got through it. I always and continued to do this self-deprivating thing in my journey, and I only recently stopped doing that, maybe, I don't know, about a year ago. And it wasn't a conscious thing.
Okay.
But I do realize now that when you change the narrative of how you speak to and about yourself, you know, you have the narrative that's going on in your mind, oh, don't be so stupid, you know, all these things. But also what you say to other people, like, you know, when I left university and I was, you know, in an office job, I would always say things to cover my back.
Right.
You know, in case there was a mistake. I'd be like, oh, don't give me that. You know, I'm terrible with these things. Or,
right.
Oh, you know, my spelling's dreadful. Or, you know, I would put myself down a lot to cover my back. But actually, it wasn't doing me any favors, because then everybody I came into contact with, you know, was like, oh, that's a stupid girl. You know, the one that can't spell, or the one that can't, you know, do whatever. So it's really interesting. So I worked in an office job, and that was horrendous. My employer, his wife, he got married, and his wife made herself a manager. And I was the only other female in the company. Now, I think there was an issue with that to begin with, but she was also one of these really bright, sharp individuals. She had worked, she had been a banker previously, you know, so quite a high-profile job. And, you know, my monthly reviews were horrendous. That,
yeah,
you know,
I could see where this is going. She probably just wanted to rip you apart.
She did.
Yeah.
And she did every time. And I, you know, there wasn't once that I left without being in tears.
Ugh.
It was, you know, it was really unpleasant.
So, you know, I actually want to comment on what you just said. So there are two things I want to say. So the first thing is, you were talking about how you were repeating this narrative in your head, which makes complete sense. So I actually have a post coming out on Monday about affirmations. So affirmations for moms, because that's kind of my ideal client at the moment. I know there are a lot of folks that I can serve, teachers, and I used to tutor and all of that. But really, because I'm a mom, I want to connect with other moms through this dyslexia journey to help them really know, you know, the resources, what to do, what's out there, and not just thinking it's reading and writing. It's social emotional stuff. So I have this post coming out on Monday where I talk about the power of affirmations, but not just for moms, but for your kids. And so I started doing affirmations with my 4-year-old because I sense she already has ADHD and executive functioning issues, because I do. So I see some of me in her, and I don't know what narrative she has in her head from school. You know, if teachers are like, oh, you're messy, or I don't know, but it's like, we have to pour into our kids. And so,
especially girls.
Yes. And so yes, exactly. And so as I'm hearing you in your, I don't know if you were in your 20s or 30s, but you were telling yourself, well, actually you said up until recently. So as well as an adult, you were still telling yourself, oh, don't give me that. And it's just like, those things become what we really think about ourselves. And then it radiates to other people. And so that was probably the clash, because this woman probably was like, what is wrong with this woman? Why can't she spell? Why can't she do this? And really the bottom line is, like, you probably were not in a place in your life to feel confident to actually advocate and say, I have dyslexia. Here's what I need. Because I know there are folks out there. There's actually an account, I don't know if you're following her, Natalie, and she's actually in London. I feel like I'm connected with so many people.
So it's her group that was having the conversation.
I love her. I interviewed her 2 years ago. And
did you?
She was the first adult dyslexic interview I ever did. And she was a proponent of tell your boss you're dyslexic. And I know she's much stronger now in her advocacy, but literally I was like, that's brilliant. Like, you should do that. You should tell your employer, I know myself. I know what's going on. Here's what I need from you. Because then that lets them know it's not that Tracy's lazy. It's just that she needs spell check. You know, she needs dragon or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So I just was thinking about that when you were talking about this horrendous woman.
Yeah. I mean, you know, she was awful. She was just awful. So eventually, the man that owned the company was a friend of mine.
Okay.
So I knew his family well, and I was actually really good friends with his mother.
Oh.
And it didn't take long actually before a case came up that she was bullying me.
Wow.
And the mother, who was one of the major shareholders in the company, got rid of her.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah.
I wonder where that woman is now.
You know, she got in touch with me recently, which was really odd.
You had lunch with her?
No, she got in touch with me.
Oh,
she found me on LinkedIn.
Maybe she wants to apologize. I don't think.
No, she didn't apologize, no.
I was trying to be positive.
Yeah, I dare say she doesn't see that there was any blame on her part, but you know, working in an office, I found similarly just as awful an experience as being at school, because it felt like I was right back at school. I was being judged, and I was being, you know, constantly monitored, and you know, somebody was always breathing down my neck to make sure that I was performing, which obviously just made things worse.
Right.
So
anxiety.
Yeah, it was again just a very unpleasant experience. But then, you know, I had my kids, and I did carry on working for a little while in the beginning, but then you know what it's like, nursery fees are so expensive. And I ended up spending everything that I was earning just to have a placeholder in the company that I was working at.
Oh wow.
And my kids were getting raised by 16-year-old kids in the nursery, you know what I mean? And then saying stuff, and I was like,
what am I doing? That? Yeah, what am I doing?
So I kind of went, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to, you know, be a stay-at-home mom, and I started up a small online business, which was great, and that was really a nice thing, because that was really the breakthrough for me to have some confidence in myself, because if anything went wrong, I only had myself to blame.
Yes.
But I was much more forgiving than everybody else was.
Right.
So, and to be honest with you, when I had my own company, I very rarely did things wrong, which I found very interesting. I think I just have a different, when you're working for somebody else's company, you have protocol and you have methodology in doing things that they want you to, you know, ways that they want you to tackle certain things or do things. And when you have your own company, obviously you have the freedom to do the things that are best for you, which aren't always obvious to other people, but it makes sense to you. So that was great. Unfortunately, I had to close that business down. We moved over to the area where my husband's parents live, to be near with them to get childcare.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, it didn't work out very well. Unfortunately, my father-in-law got very ill, and about a year later, I nursed him through, and then he died about a year later, and then my mother-in-law had dementia and moved in with us.
Okay.
So she lived with us for quite some time. But when it got to the point where she needed to go into a professional care home that had locked doors and things because she was escaping.
Right.
It was weird. I had a moment. I thought, wow, for the first time in my life, I can really make my own choices in where I want to go and what I want to do. And so the first thing I did was I bought an online course on social media, because I thought, well, you know, I quite like Instagram. It's fun. I like social media, and if there's a chance I can make money out of it, brilliant.
Yeah.
And that was a huge turning point for me, because I then became a serial course buyer. Like, I'm one of those people, I am never not doing an online course.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I enjoy my education. I love educating myself. I never ever thought, if you had told 10-year-old me that I would love doing courses, I would have been like, I do not believe you. But I love the empowerment that it gives me, and the confidence and the skills. And I still struggle a little bit now, you know, and this is, so I'm 47 now. This is about 2 years ago that I began this journey, and that's why there was that shift.
Yeah.
But I have so much knowledge and skill, and it makes me feel really good about myself.
I love that.
So,
I just love the full circle of the confidence not being where you thought it. Well, I don't even know if at that time you thought you could be where you are now in terms of confidence. But I think, like, hearing your story, I mean, really, I mean, this is like, I love, like, actually, I was reading this comment here about the affirmations that Marcia was talking about. Her daughter is dyslexic, and I remember she shared that and how she created affirmations for her friends at school. It's those things, like, these are the things, like, you're doing fantastic now, but where would your life be if you had affirmations when you were 10? You know, like, what would that narrative look like in terms of, like, and that's really why I do what I do, because I want parents to be aware, and I want kids to feel, you know, you have a place, you have a skill set. Maybe you haven't found it yet. Maybe college isn't for you, and that's okay. You know, and I think being a special educator, it's like, there's so many teachers that I would encounter that would say, look at this test grade, this kid is not college material. And I'm like, you can't say that to someone. And not everybody is college material, but it's not in the mindset of, like, you're stupid. It's like, we have chefs, we have mechanics, you know, we have people that have different skill sets. And I feel like your dyslexia has allowed you to be very creative. So I know we're closing out, but I did want to ask you, so what is your actual job now? You're social media marketing or something, correct?
So, yeah, I mean, now that's a question. I'm actually now I teach video, I teach social media, and I am also a Kajabi specialist. So
I saw that on your profile, so that's why I was asking, because it's so creative, it's different, you know, it's not a corporate job, it's not whatever society tells you to do, you're making your own path, and I love that.
And I think that's why I'm loving my education. I think education is set up in a way that it doesn't suit everybody, but I've given myself the opportunity to put together my own building blocks to have the education that I choose, and that's why I love it so much now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know, like, there weren't a lot of people who were viewing it live, but I know people view these stories later. And also, I put this on my YouTube channel. It's also on my Think Dyslexia app. So I love doing these weekly calls, because I meet so many fantastic people around the world. And I feel like a lot of people are in the UK that I always interview. Maybe that's a research point within itself.
Yeah, could be.
But yeah, I want to say thank you again, and everyone who's viewing, wherever you are, have a good afternoon, day. And Tracy, let's keep in touch.
Yeah, you know, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you today. You're such a lovely, warm person. You're the kind of person I'd like to be friends with.
I love it. Let's do it. I always love chatting with people over voice threads, so you know where to find me.
I do. Brilliant. Thank you so much for today.
Yes. All right. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.